Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics Podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me as always is the Snoop Dogg to my weed, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
This week we're talking about leprechauns.
So I think we need to make it clear from the very beginning here that apparently leprechauns don't wear green. In the cursory research that I did in the 5 minutes before this episode, according to Wikipedia, they are more commonly associated with red.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Lucky Charms lied to me.
Yeah. All freaking St. Patrick's Day as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody here is not familiar with the legend of the leprechaun, we're going to try to ignore the huge conglomeration of modern depictions of the leprechaun. And we're going to go just a little bit farther back to the more traditional versions. A leprechaun is classified as a solitary fairy, which is to say a not part of the fairy courts. They run around and do their own thing. They're mischievous little dudes, sometimes described as very small, sometimes described as more like knee height. One of the common aspects of them seems to be that they are mischievous and they make trouble, and then if you capture them or somehow foil their plans or threaten them, they can grant you wishes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty common trope amongst folklore, where there are lots of creatures that kind of fall into that. Oh, if you catch one, they'll get you a wish to get out of whatever it is they're doing. Mermaids did that at one point. But leprechauns are the ones kind of most commonly associated with it. They also have a kind of broad association with rainbows, and sometimes they will hide treasure at the end of a rainbow. That's probably the most famous legend anybody will know about them. But we need to make it clear, apparently, not green, red. But they are fancily dressed. There is a bunch of descriptions about the various kinds of clothes they wear with their little shoes and their funny little hats and the various kinds of waistcoats they wear. It's great. These guys are dapper.
Maybe the original sightings of leprechauns were someone who had red-green color blindness and just got a little bit dicey describing it.
That's an excellent idea. So we both made the connection to, once we heard that they were actually red, to red caps as well.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can tie those guys in. I'm also interested in this whole wish granting thing.
Mm-hmm. So am I. I think there's some interesting ideas kind of tied with that. And if they have this sort of reality warping ability, why don't they use it more often for themselves? Why does it require them being caught?
My initial thought to that is it's something they can do, but that it has an associated cost of some sort. Okay. So you catch a leprechaun and you're like, I'm going to, put you in a cage or whatever. I'm going to capture you. And so they maybe it literally shortens their lifespan to grant something that would be big like a wish.
Interesting.
And so that every time that happens to them, they're going to they know they're going to die of old age sooner, but maybe that's hundreds or thousands of years in fairy life. So it's worth it to get out of a bad situation to sort of trade off your future like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's something like that, or maybe it literally they can't do that for themselves. Maybe it's something you can, or the other option would be they literally cannot do it for themselves, for selfish reasons. They only can do it for other people. Although that, I don't know how I feel about that. Feels like that's ripe for loophole abuse, where two leprechauns stand in a circle and grant each other wishes.
Yeah, I feel like there's I like the idea that there's drawbacks to doing the wish.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's because otherwise I feel like leprechauns would have a much different place in society if they can just, alter the universe to their whim.
Yeah.
Without repercussion.
I got a half-formed idea, which is what if instead of granting wishes, what they actually do is they are multiverse traversing creatures. So they move from reality to reality. And if you ask for a wish, all they can do is move you to a reality where that is true. And they swap the you from that reality to this one.
Oh, I like that. I think that's a really cool idea. And I also like the idea, what if the price of that was the you that the reality you're moving to is destroyed or consumed to fuel this.
Okay. So they don't pull the other you into this universe, the universe you started from. You just leave. That one bursts into flames and is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And then you drop into their place. Yeah, that's cool. And then that explains a little bit why the leprechaun, quote unquote, doesn't do that for themselves. It's because they are always doing that. That's how they get around. They're constantly moving between universes to just check things out and see how they are and find new people to play tricks on and stuff. So it doesn't really help them.
I'm reminded of a webcomic Schlock Mercenary, I think.
Yeah.
That used a mode of travel similar to that.
Yeah,
for their hyperdrive.
Theirs is actually it's called Terraport, and what it is it rips all of your rips you down to component particles and puts each of those particles through a tiny warp hole. But there was a second version. There's another thing is where everybody would go through these gates, and the people who ran the gates, whenever you would you go in on one side and they quote unquote teleport you to the other side of the universe. What they also do is clone you at the same time and then interrogate the clones to find out everything that you know.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Schlock Mercenary is wild, and you should definitely go read it. Although it did go on daily, 7 days a week for like 10 or 20 years or something like that. It went forever. It only just finished like earlier this year.
So if you got a few months to...
Yeah, that's a fucking deep dive, man.
But yeah, Leprechauns.
Okay, so Leprechauns are extra dimensional, extra universal. Oh God, we were just laughing about the phrase that appears in the Wikipedia article for Leprechauns, the universal leprechaun, and we somehow managed to make it relevant.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, so do these guys have a home somewhere? Is there a leprechaun universe that they're all coming from?
Well, they're described as fairies, so...
Yeah, but they don't have to be fairies. I mean, maybe that's how we perceive them because we think of fairies, but they obviously aren't. It says explicitly they're not associated with the rest of them. They're solitary. I kind of want to make them like refugees from a dying universe.
Interesting.
Like that they managed to escape, but then now because they have no home, they're like kind of nihilistic travelers. They're like running around just causing mischief.
What if they can only ever visit a universe once?
Okay.
And when they run out of universes, like they're going to be stuck in that, like they're going to be shunted back to that original universe that they've been trying to escape this whole time.
Or maybe the other option would be to, if they run out of universe jumping, is they're stuck wherever they ended up. Like each one could be their last.
Okay, yeah.
I like both of those. Those are both good. Okay, so what were they originally? Like, what is it that made them flee their home universe?
I feel like they were probably like the dominant species in that universe, whatever. Like their powers and whatever put them in a position of power.
I think that I kind of want to make. I like the idea that their universe was very small. Like they came from a place where there was like essentially one planet and one sun. And that was it. There was no stars in the sky. There was no other places to travel to. And it was this little like concentrated, like all of the energy was in one place, you know? And so that meant they didn't do a lot of traveling at the time. They were like trying to escape it. So maybe it wasn't their universe was destroyed, but maybe more like their original universe is kind of like a prison that they've used up all of the resources from or something. And so it's sort of this desolate wasteland. That could be cool.
I also kind of like the idea that like because they come from like this very small universe, like they're not particularly creative. So like it wasn't until they started meeting other species and other creatures and seeing other worlds that they're like, oh, we've been thinking small this whole time.
Yeah. Ooh, so maybe their universe isn't even, maybe it's not even small necessarily. It's just there's nothing there. Like it's very boring. So like or at least the way they perceive it is like they go there and it's just an infinite plane, a flat plane, you know, where there's no mountains or other life other than themselves or something like that. So in that case, to me, that sounds that they have something like a shape-changing ability. Like that makes sense to me that they have the ability to adapt to the universes that they come into.
Okay.
Does that make, I think that kind of makes a,
sure.
Coming up with a world that would produce little tiny men who also wear waistcoats seems like a lot of trouble. So maybe they were a thinking goo. Like in their natural form, they were, oh God, I was just watching DS9. Have you seen DS9?
I have not.
Okay. So there's a shapeshifter in that series, and his like home planet is where all the shapeshifters live, and they're literally just a sea of goo floating across the surface of this planet as they all like meld and join together into this giant, what they call a Great Link.
Okay.
And I'm sort of thinking about like, that could be like what Leprechaun's homeworld looks like, except, you know, it's them having seeped they aren't even individuals until they break away from this concatenation of goo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when by excising themselves, they're like a little chunk of their entire species that is broken off, become an individual, and then it goes off on adventures into other universes.
So these are just fragments of the leprechaun?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
So I also like the idea that maybe there's like some mechanic or reason why they're so quick to give in to like demands or to offer up like these reality bending wishes or whatever. Like maybe if they're kept in captivity for too long, like they start to lose their power, or they start to revert to their original form, or
maybe they just can't survive away from homeworld that long. Like, so they have to go back.
Oh, so they have to check in, touch base with the original leprechaun.
Yeah, they have to meet up with the other leprechaun substance and like subsume themselves. Otherwise, actually, they could that's when they're in their like natural state. Like that's the leprechaun version of the story. And if they stay as individuals too long, they like go crazy. They yeah, like, or maybe crazy is the wrong word, but like they lose their like higher functions and revert to something more animalistic. And that's where we bring in the red cap, where
I like
that's when they're murdering people for the hell of it.
And soaking their caps in the blood of their victims.
Yeah, yeah. I like that, where it manifests itself as behavior that isn't like, they're not taking people, they don't kill them and then eat them. They like kill them, take them apart, and then like, I don't know, like do things that seem strange, like very strange to to one of us, because it's not done for like reasons that we would understand. Like soaking your clothing in the blood of a victim is actually a really terrible way to dye it. Like it doesn't work well, but they are doing it because it makes sense to a logic that's like there's something in their circuitry malfunctioning, right? Like there's something that's like the program of themselves that was sent out isn't working anymore, and it creates this abhorrent behavior.
Okay, so I like the idea that maybe like the red cap is just like one aspect or manifestation of this like psychosis they go through, and like maybe there's just all sorts of ways that this manifests, so just behaving oddly, violently.
Yeah, and maybe like things like the varying degrees to which they are like dangerous entities. Like sometimes you'll meet them and they'll just be nice, and maybe they'll even like help you out because they feel like it. But then later on, maybe they're malicious, and like their like wish granting ability starts to become more monkey's paw stuff, where like it's revealed to be something you absolutely hated.
Oh yeah,
and that is kind of explainable by the fact that some of these have been away from homeworld too long and haven't had their like programming refreshed, and are starting to mess around more and like be less empathetic. Well, actually, maybe like one of the things is that they're sent out meant to be observers and like to go check out these other universes. Maybe they're scouts looking for a place that the leprechaun Urgu could all move to.
Interesting.
So they're meant to be like observers and very low impact on the places they're sent to. But if they go from universe to universe too long and spend too much time away from the leprechaun goo, like they start to get more erratic. They start to play around more, and like they get distracted by their ability to screw around and like have fun, basically. And the longer that goes, eventually it breaks down into like true psychosis.
Yeah.
But so their behavior is variable across their lifespan, unless they go back to the Urgu and like hook themselves back in and get refreshed. And actually, that's not even really like they're going to get refurbished. They're literally going to disappear into it, and then maybe at some point another one will be made.
Well, with all hive mind mentalities, I always think it's kind of interesting. Like what if it brings some of these traits back to the Urgu, and there's like there's danger to that. And so there's a potential for like these red caps or whatever to be rejected from or prevented from even returning.
Yeah, maybe they have to go through the trouble to like check them out before they let them back into the Urgu, like give them a scan or something.
And so the reason these leprechauns are so eager to like pass off their wishes and whatnot is because if they're in captivity for too long, if they're prevented from returning, they may not be allowed to return at all.
Yeah. It's an actual death sentence to them. Like it will turn them into something that will no longer be able to ever fulfill their purpose.
Yeah.
So if they are acting as scouts for the Urgu, the leprechaun thing, what are they looking for? Like, what is it that they'll find and go, ooh, yes, that's what we want?
I like the idea that like one of the things that's heavily tied with leprechauns is rainbows. And I'm wondering if there's something to do with like the visible light spectrum or something that they're looking for.
Yeah, that could be cool. I definitely like the idea that could tie into it, that they need a good light source with the proper spectrums. Mm-hmm. It also could be maybe the rainbows are somehow tied, that spectrum is tied to how they travel between universes. Like that's a manifestation of the gates they make or something.
Maybe they learned it from the Norse Rainbow Road. Yeah.
What if they're looking for another big hive mind? Like they don't view humans and like singular people as like they view us the way we viewed like dogs or like wild animals. They're like, oh, it's cute and you can have fun with it, but like, it's not a friend. Like you're not going to have a conversation with it that's actually interesting because it's a lower life form. So maybe what they're looking for is another, like something that they feel is on their equal, that's like on their level.
Interesting. I also like the idea that maybe like they see like these creatures that are not part of a hive mind and they pity it, and maybe like they fear that like they know their species like can go through like this roadkill phase or going feral, and they fear that they're catching that from humans and whatnot. Like you would think you'd catch rabies or something from something else.
Yeah, they think that like the individuality rubs off on them. Mm-hmm. So like they don't really understand it, so they view us as a threat. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That would also mean that they would want to keep people out of their homeworld a lot too. So like they'll never bring them back to the original Leprechaun planet.
So really this whole time, these leprechauns are just searching for illithids.
Ooh, maybe. Yeah, that's a pairing I wouldn't want to have. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't want them to be friends. Where suddenly illithids get access to all universes.
I feel like that's what they'd be searching for anyways. So
yeah, I mean, like that's a match made in well, not heaven, but someplace. Okay, so I wonder if there's a way we can tie in any of these other features of them. Not really that much else going on with them because they're kind of variable. So there's lots of different things they could have been. So yeah, like in their natural state, they're solitary observers. They're scouts being sent out to look for wherever this leprechaun would like to make contact with. Then they move into a more mischievous phase where they start screwing around with people and like being pranksters. Like maybe they could be the origin of things like alien myths or alien visitations where they're doing it just for the heck of it, you know? Like they're like, this is interesting, like this is fun. And then eventually they go crazy and start like taking people apart. And at that point they're doomed. They can't be returned. So we talked about them. They're shapeshifters as well. Because like I think for practicality reasons they need to be in order to be able to show up in. So maybe they're the origin of all of those different myths of, oh, you captured a thing and that gave you a wish. Like it's not just leprechauns, but it's like they are all like at one point they became mermaids as well because they were investigating underneath the water, or when they were in the one that happened to be in the Near East like was captured and they called it a djinn. You know, they thought it was an elemental spirit. So maybe it's that these are like whatever origin whatever creature we're really talking about in the origin. We named it Leprechaun, but it's the origin of all of these different things for this for whatever version of Earth we're talking about it interacting with.
I also like the idea that maybe because they're in part of like this huge overarching spirit, like they have a little bit of difficulty with a sense of scale.
Oh yeah.
Which is why they show up like when they're trying to mimic humans.
Yeah.
Like they show up as diminutive, like 3 foot tall men. Cause like, close enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I'm only off by like a couple of feet.
On a cosmic scale, it's basically the same thing.
Yeah. That explains why like stuff is sort of off about them. You know, like they're not able to observe us particularly closely. And especially if they don't have that much time to do it in, like they kind of have one go to like go and interact with humans in a normal way before they start going a little crazy.
Yeah.
So they don't have a lot of time to get good at it. Okay. So how could we integrate this version of Leprechauns into a story? That's something we try to do a lot here is like figure out where these things would fit into a narrative. This doesn't feel like I don't like the use of them as a sort of it's a way to like introduce like the wish fulfillment for the author, right? Like this is a way for you to sort of go, oh, like here's how to wait as a catalyst for our story to move across. Like we're going to start with a poor fisherman who blah, 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 blah. And then he ends up being king. And it's like, now that's a pretty dull, dull tale. So
yeah, the other side of that is kind of like, was it the Giving Tree or any other kind of monkey's paw style stories where, the be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I do like the idea of breaking down more what that means to have been transported to another universe, that where whatever it is you want us to have been what it means to be transplanted to another universe where your wish is true, but it's not the same place. Like there are going to be differences and stuff. So like let's use the wish almost anybody would go for, which is like to be rich, right? Like I want to have all of the money that I could ever spend, right? And so the leprechaun transplants you to another universe where you are the view of that universe is rich. They locked into it, or they were born into a rich family or something, and so that person poof gone, and you drop down into their life, and like having to piece together what has happened and like going through. Like figuring out like how the you of this universe was different than you are, and like how that has affected how everyone perceives you, and like are you the way you are because of how you like something intrinsic in your nature, or is it like the just you reacting to circumstances? So if you put yourself in different circumstances, do you become a different person?
Nature versus nurture.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a really interesting story idea, especially like that almost makes like the leprechaun kind of tangential to the story.
Yeah.
Like everything we've described about them, unless,
well, I think you loop them back in at the end.
Yeah. Or like if the wisher is now experiencing regret from his wish and trying to find a leprechaun again to undo it. And then you could kind of,
or even just get to the bottom of the mystery. Like, he just wants answers. Like he gets his wish, spends the course of, the third act of the book or the second act of the book, like figuring all this stuff out and like realizing that he's not only did it change for him, but like he is in a different, like it couldn't possibly be the same place. Maybe he comes to a point where he's like, okay, in the history 500 years ago, in this universe, I don't know, let's say the Crusades were successful or something like that. And so he's living in an entirely different like universe. Like he looks into the history and says, this is all different now. And then he comes back and finds the same leprechaun or maybe a different one, and just is like, tell me what's going on. I need to know the answers. And then you get the info dump of the explanation of what leprechauns actually do. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's...
you could. That's one way to do it. I was just going to say, one thing you can always do is just not explain shit. Like come up with all of these answers in the back of your head. And then if you're an author or a DM or something like that, you don't have to provide the answers. The fact that they exist in your head and you are acting as though they are true will improve the story, even if you never explain that to your audience.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe they won't, but it will make a more consistent story, even if you never do the info dump.
And then you can hang on to that info dump for when you're sitting at a convention somewhere and some fan comes up with a microphone and acts all smug and you're like, well, actually,
which I think is called pulling a Sanderson.
Yes.
Who has an answer for everything. Yeah. Or you could, if you manage to be successful with the first thing, you can always release a world book.
Oh yeah.
Encyclopedia guide as a little quick cash grab there to explain things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I also like the idea that like a leprechaun's wish sort of functions on like maybe like the shortest path to technically fulfilling a wish.
Yeah.
So like it's why like you're always warned to like, oh, be very explicit with what you wish for.
Yeah. Because they're just going to look through all of the universes and the first one they come across that technically fulfills what you asked for.
Satisfies. Yeah.
Yeah. Then that's what the one they transport you to.
Mm-hmm. Regardless of the damage or the differences between your current universe and the next one.
Maybe one little clarification I think we would make is maybe it transports your consciousness to the other universe, into the body of the you from there. And that's what kills the other you. Because that opens up the ability for people to say, like, I wish I was taller, you know, like, and then it doesn't just like transport you bodily into the universe where you were taller, but you're still like the same in the same
yeah,
you.
That makes sense. And that also sort of prevents people from like, hey, how come Ted looks really different today?
Exactly. Where you're like, no, you were dropped into the body of the you that has been living there, or maybe like a different person even. If there isn't a you in that universe where they're like, what's the closest one? Like there isn't a Scott Paladin in this universe. I'll just drop him in this random bozo, you know, like he fulfills the qualifications.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it.
Or even like as the Leprechaun's like rifling through his multiverse Rolodex, he's like, are you sure you want to be you? Because I can get you in right here. Like if you don't mind being somebody else.
Well, I also like the idea that that kind of introduces an interesting idea about how leprechauns travel. Like, what if they abide by the same mechanics? Like, where maybe there is a leprechaun in every universe, and it just shunts its consciousness between those universes.
So the only thing that I feel like it maybe is a limiting factor. This is totally a reasonable way to go about it, but the only limiting factor on that is what if you have like if a leprechaun goes wild, goes feral, then there is not an opportunity for another one to come in, and it's sort of like locked off that universe from the leprechaun hive mind.
I like that, and I feel like that also kind of adds a level of stakes to like going feral. Like, if these leprechauns are supposed to be scouts in these universes looking for a hive mind, going feral would mean that they can't bring the hive mind to this place once they've found what they're looking for.
Or maybe that it could also be a higher cost. Like maybe they make a body that they send to the universe, and that's the leprechaun body. And that's the one with like shape-shifting abilities and stuff. But maybe they could always, as like an emergency measure, you could also have them drop into a human body, erase the consciousness out of somebody and drop their own in there to then act as a sort of mind parasite to go in and to go deal with the red cat problem or something, so they could get that body back. That's an interesting take on it. I like both the idea that like if they go feral, it is completely locked off and that just closes that universe off. I love that idea, but I like you can, depending on how you want your story to work, you could take it in the other direction too.
Absolutely.
Just by raising the stakes a little bit.
But yeah, I love the idea that like not only is this leprechaun like this hive mind creature, but it's also like it's literally a universe or a multiverse spanning creature. Like it has
tendrils all over,
but like it just exists in multiple universes simultaneously.
Yeah. And in that sense, maybe there was only ever one at a time. Like it's always kind of like it didn't like send out tens of billions of these in different directions. It's doing it one at a time, but because it's traversing from multiverse to multiverse, it's doing it into different points on those timelines. So it seems like there are simultaneous ones existing at the same time, but from its perspective, it's always doing it linearly. Like it's just trying over and over again.
Kind of a Doctor Who situation.
Yeah, a little bit. Because you can totally play with time travel with this version of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe, so I guess the one option for, if it can play with time travel, maybe one of the options for your wish is I want to go back in time, and it doesn't transplant you to a version of yourself. It transplants you into the mind of somebody else who was native to that timeline. And so, but in that case, it doesn't need to make you go to another universe. It can do that extraction and reinsertion within your same universe. And then you get to find out if determinism is true, like if you can really change the past or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you have anything else on your mind on this one, or are we circle and drain?
I feel like we got some really, really interesting ideas with this. Go too much further on this.
Yeah, no, I think this is good. Yeah. All right. Well, in that case, bye.
All right. Until next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Monster Mechanics. We are still looking for submissions to the random monster tables that we're going to be using in future episodes. Go to the link in the description of this podcast or to our Twitter account where you'll find our pinned tweet. Now for the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin, and hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. All of the ideas generated during this podcast are released under a Do What the F*** You Want public license.